In this video, I'll be taking a look back at 2023 for Hell Let Loose, the updates, the patches, and the events around the game and its development to see if, in my opinion, it's had a good year or not. Then, looking forward to this year and what we know is coming. I'll be going through this month by month, and there will be chapters in the video so you can easily navigate through them. As I go through the events, please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Before we start with 2023, we need to get a quick summary of 2022. And in 2022, we had a total of 1 patch and 2 updates. Also, Team 17 acquired Hell Let Loose in January 2022, giving Black Matter, the original developers and creators of Hell Let Loose, an 18-month development contract, which would end in June, July 2023. The last update was Update 13, which released on the 6th of December, and that was titled Burning Snow. The major additions that came with that update was the T-70 light tank for the Soviets, Jeeps for all factions, flamethrowers, and Molotovs. And the last update or patch or whatever we got for 2022 was a hotfix for Update 13, which released on the 15th of December. And the December average player count was 6,833, and a peak player count of 14,305. And these numbers are for PC only, can't get the numbers for the console version. And generally in December, you have the sales, which always lead to an increase in player count. And I believe there was a free-to-play weekend. So, of course, we start with January in 2023. And during this month, absolutely nothing happened for Hell Let Loose. There was no communication from the devs on Steam, no developer briefings, no patches, no updates, absolutely nothing. Comparing that to January in 2022, there was 3 developer briefings which gave us some information about the upcoming patch 17. January would end with an average player count of 6,109 and a peak count of 11,365. Going into February, the lack of communication we had in January would unfortunately carry on through until the 23rd of February. And it was a huge, major piece of communication which really probably no one expected, because in February it was announced that Black Matter, the creators of Hell Let Loose, were leaving the project there and then, months before they originally should have, which would have been June or July in 2023. Now, why did they leave early? No idea. It could be that Team 17 had their own plans that they wanted to push forward with, while Black Matter had their own ideas of what they wanted to do, which just clashed, so Team 17 wanted to get started on what they wanted to do earlier. And that's probably right, considering what happens after February. It's also announced in February that Team 17 are creating a new studio to push Hell Let Loose forward. They weren't creating it there and then. It was already created at that point. They were probably recruiting more people in. And we know that Team 17 had developers already there because Black Matter were training up and doing a knowledge share with these developers behind the scenes. We know this because we were told this, like us as in the war correspondents, which are the partnered creators for Hell Let Loose. We were told this in our Discord chat that we have with the developers of Hell Let Loose. But still, it's really quite interesting that the termination of the development contract with Black Matter happened months before it should have ended. February would end with an average player count of 5,335 with a peak count of 10,724. We would get our first piece of communication from Team 17 on March the 9th, which would come with them announcing a health update for Hell Let Loose. Coming in this health update would be new game analytics, and when this was announced, a lot of veteran players probably didn't like the sound of game analytics coming back into the game, because when the game originally launched in early access back in 2019, it did have game analytics in the game, but if you had them on, it would negatively impact the frame rate. So there were a lot of videos that were made, I think I even made a couple, which referenced turning off the game analytics to improve your game performance. So with Team 17 announcing they would come back, I think a lot of people just thought you would turn them on or they'd be forced on and your performance would drop. The idea behind these new game analytics is that it would help the devs identify issues quicker and easier, which then in theory would lead to more bug fixes coming to the game, which is just good, to be honest. The health update would also aim to fix performance and stability issues that update 13 introduced. They wanted to improve Vivox because Vivox is the VoIP system that Hell Let Loose uses, and there was a lot of issues going on at the time with it. I know there's still issues going on, but they were a lot worse back then. Improve server stability, LOD improvements. If you're not sure what LODs are, pretty much if you're looking at a building that's far away and it looks like a mashed potato, that's because the LOD for that object you're looking at is bad, so it looks like mashed potato. And improving the LODs of these objects would help to make the game look better, and the idea behind them is that it will help to make the game run better. And they would be looking to update most, if not every single map in the game to improve performance and stability across everything. The second developer briefing we get would list some of the known issues that at that point were really known in Hell Let Loose, including the loadout bug, the grenade bug, hit reg issues, wavy lines, and weapon firing and missing audio. The loadout bug and the grenade bug had been in Hell Let Loose for such a long time. I have no idea when those two bugs first appeared. The loadout bug is pretty much if you choose a non-default kit for any role, but then you spawn in with the default kit. That was the loadout bug. The grenade bug would be an issue when you go to throw a grenade and it looked like you've thrown it, but you haven't thrown it, and then the grenade would start throwing itself. It was very odd. Hit reg issues, pretty much where you hit someone, it should kill them based on the gun you're using and where you've hit them, but the hit hasn't registered on the server, so that player takes no damage, or it hits them in the arm or something, dealing half damage. I'm not too sure on the wavy lines issue, and weapon firing and missing audio I believe is more console related issue. It was also announced that some of the reload animations were being reworked, primarily the M1 Garand, the MP40 and the TT-33 Soviet pistol. It was also announced that locomotion improvements would be coming to the game. So to cap March off, that will be 3 months where we've had no patches or updates to the game. It was announced in the second dev briefing that update 13.5, the health update, would be coming in early April. And March would end us with an average player count of 5,772 and a peak of 11,646. And now we go into April. April would be a huge month for Hell Let Loose, despite only receiving update 13.5. And that's because on the 3rd of April, Team 17 announced the roadmap for 2023. And they did this with a video with higher ups from the dev team. They sort of sneakily announced the name of the new studio that will be taking Hell Let Loose forward, Cover 6 Studios. Only say sneakily because their name and logo was only shown right at the end of the video. It wasn't actually said during the video, which was a bit odd. But this roadmap was a really good and ambitious roadmap, and I think it only really received just a lot of positive feedback from the community. There would be a couple of things that had some negative feedback about them, but in general it was a great roadmap, and I would say everyone was looking forward to it. The major pieces of the roadmap would be in June, we'd be getting the British forces. In July, we'd be getting a new game mode called Objective and the 101st Airborne DLC. There would be an in-game store released in that month as well, which did have negative feedback around it because people were wondering if they were going to be charging for any other extras that would be coming to the game. But I will say nothing really different has changed. It's just that you can access the cosmetic DLC in-game instead of having to go to the Steam store or the PlayStation or Xbox store. So it's just a bit of an easier way to get access to the DLC. In September, there will be a Windows 10 version of Hell Let Loose, and pretty much what I think this is that Hell Let Loose would be sold on the Xbox store on PC. There would be a Steam Deck verified version coming, and for December, a huge surprise would be the announcement that the Finnish and the Polish forces were coming to Hell Let Loose, including the Battle of Danzig map and a new game mode called Skirmish. A very, very ambitious roadmap for Hell Let Loose, but generally is something that really pleased the community because it made it look like Team 17 were investing a lot into the future of Hell Let Loose. So really, it was just a good, positive outlook on what was coming and really what the future of Hell Let Loose could bring. And then a couple of days after that, on the 5th of April, Update 13, the health update, would land for the game. And it did bring performance updates, but for some people the game was worse. A lot of people didn't like the new M1 Grand reload animation. There were some server performance and more VoIP issues. A bug came for the Kar98. I'm not sure if it affected the other bolt action rifles as well, but where you were trying to reload it from like empty, where you had no bullets in the chamber or anything, and it would perform the reload animation twice. Now I think there was quite a bit of negativity around that update because it had been nearly 4 months since the last patch or update for Hell Let Loose, and ultimately it was a small patch and it introduced some bugs, mainly the Kar98 reload bug, which should have easily been identified when just testing the patch internally. I think this did raise some questions regarding Team 17 and their capability to bring the game forward when they would introduce a simple bug like this, which really should have just been found and noticed really easily. There were also some other issues such as tank shell penetration issues, LOD concerns, issues with the main menu, and some animation issues when sprinting. In the dev briefing after the health update dropped, El Alamein was announced to come with the British forces, mortars were announced, and it was clarified that the Finnish and Polish forces would be smaller factions, not full-fledged factions with lots of different vehicles and all the weapons that you would expect them to get. It would be smaller ones for smaller maps, which did disappoint some people. Also in April, it was announced that Expression Games were brought on board to co-develop Hell Let Loose. So at that point, we would have had Team 17, Cover 6, and Expression Games developing Hell Let Loose. Flix Interactive, who are mainly there to, well, co-develop the game and do the console version. I'm not sure if they were still there at that point, but right now I can confirm they are not working on Hell Let Loose anymore. But at one point we could have had really 4 different studios working on Hell Let Loose, we'll say 3, which really is quite an investment for a game that doesn't have a massive audience like Hell Let Loose. But it does show that Team 17 were willing to invest in the game to try and grow it and improve it. April would end us with an average player count of 6,387 with a peak of 12,559. Like April, May would be a huge month for Hell Let Loose because the British faction would come into the game. We already knew that El Alamein was coming, and the second map that was coming was Driel, a bridge map which instantly received a bunch of negative thoughts towards it because we already had Remagen, which a lot of people didn't like because it was a bridge map where the center of the map was just a long bridge and that was the only way to get from one end of the map to the other. But Driel wasn't quite like that because the river in the middle you can just run across, so it is a bit different than Remagen. There was some negativity around the announcement, or the full announcement of the British forces, because some people weren't happy that the Sherman Firefly was coming in as a heavy tank because it wasn't really a heavy tank, it was more like a medium tank. And with the roadmap announcement, the video that came with it, the developers really wanted to focus on historical accuracy for Hell Let Loose going forward, but the British faction wouldn't be historically accurate when it came down to the weapons, vehicles, and the uniforms. Hell Let Loose was also rebranded. The name wasn't changed, but the logo and the font used for the logo was changed. It looks pretty good. I think generally there was a lot of positive thoughts around that, not a lot of negativity around that, to be honest. The non-verbal tools were announced, which is people who don't use microphones can bring up a wheel on the screen to call out certain things. I don't really see that used on PC, but I think that's because a lot of people generally use a microphone or type in chat. I wonder if it's mainly used for the console version. Dive to Prone was announced. The step height update was announced, which means that when you're running along, you no longer should have to jump over small rocks, you should just run straight over them. But when the British update came, it was a very controversial update. First off, let's mention the sprint speed increase. Now, the sprint speed was increased by 15%, which doesn't seem like a major increase, but as you started to play the game more with this new sprint speed, it felt like it was too fast for the game. Now, a major complaint really for new people coming into Hell Let Loose was that the sprint speed was always quite low. So the developers did this to try and please more people, to get more people into the game, but the community pushed back against this in a big way. Dive to prone, that was introduced, and I think dive to prone is a good addition to the game, but when it was introduced it was easily abused. You would get people pretty much dolphin diving across the map, or people using it to get to certain places that they should not be able to get to. And onto the British faction itself, like I said earlier, there wasn't really a good choice of weapons and vehicles in terms of making it historically accurate. You had the Patton 1914 Enfield, which was a World War I rifle. It was used in World War II, but only for the Home Guard, which are people back in England. So it didn't really see service at all during World War II. You had the Lanchester submachine gun, which was used in World War II, but only by the Royal Navy. It wasn't used on the front lines. The Lewis gun was included as the main machine gun role for the British forces, but the Lewis gun was primarily used in World War I. It was used in World War II, but the British main machine gun was the Bren gun, which was included with the British update for Hell Let Loose, but you couldn't use it like a machine gun because even though it had a bipod on the model for the weapon, you couldn't use the bipod, so it was mainly a competitor to the STG-44 and the BAR. In terms of the British tanks, we got the Sherman Firefly as a heavy tank, which really wasn't a heavy tank at all. People really wanted to see the Churchill. And the issues with the uniforms, there was only the one uniform that came with the British faction, which was their sort of default uniform they used in sort of Normandy really. But Al Alamein came with the British update, and you would expect to see the uniform that the British used in the sort of desert environment, or the North African theatre we should say, but that didn't come, and neither did the Germans get their uniform for the North African theatre. So with Team 17 and Cover 6 saying they really wanted historical accuracy, this first update just completely went against that, which was just quite balmy, to be honest. Along with these historical accuracy issues came bugs with the British weapons. Now, the British weapons still are very large on screen when you ADS them, when you compare them to the other three factions in the game. Hopefully that will be addressed. I can say right now that hasn't been addressed, but the bugs that came with them was a large amount of weapon sway, especially when moving while aiming down the sights, and you can compare this to the other faction's weapons and they don't sway as much. And some weapons with the British faction were not zeroed or sighted correctly, which means that the bullets weren't going where you were aiming. And in Hell Let Loose, every weapon is sighted to 100 meters, so in theory when you're aiming at something that's 100 meters away, you shoot, it should hit directly where you are aiming. But with some of the weapons with the British faction, they were aiming off center, and I believe the machine gun, the Lewis gun, was aiming off to the side as well. Now, these issues with the British weapons, at least by myself, I noticed them when using them in the very first match I played. And these bugs should have been noticed by the developers, because they would have developer tools behind the scenes, or like weapon ranges they can use to test out the weapons. They should be able to notice that their weapons that they've made just aren't working correctly, but for whatever reason, this update passed through QA, passed through all their testing, and was pushed out. But clearly it was under tested and possibly very rushed. So in the first two updates we had got from Team 17, the health update which introduced bugs, and then the British faction, which was really underwhelming because of what we got and the bugs we got with it. May would end with an average player count of 7,434 with a peak count of 17,357. On the 2nd of June, Team 17 would put out a communication to the community, acknowledging the issues with the British faction update and the discussions around other changes that are brought into the game, such as the sprint speed changes. They would then give us a list of issues that were introduced with Update 14 that they were actively investigating.
Men, you are about to embark upon the great crusade towards which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
Where were you when you first saw the trailer? And you know what trailer I'm talking about. Now, myself, I stayed up to watch the PC Gaming Show to watch this trailer, and it aired close to midnight, I think, for me. And I can safely say it is the worst trailer I have ever seen. There were countless amount of YouTube videos made about this trailer, articles everywhere, and it's insane to think that this trailer was even released by Team 17 in the first place. I myself, the day after the trailer aired, because it was close to midnight, I made a video going over some of the errors that I had found with the trailer, but then even after releasing that video, I found even more issues, and more issues were even found by other community members with the trailer, and it's just honestly crazy. Now, ignoring the historical inaccuracy of the trailer, I mean, it's obvious from what you're looking at straight away. The Americans didn't parachute in to the Breakcourt Manor to take out the guns, which is what this trailer was meant to be showcasing off. That battle is shown in Band of Brothers episode 2, and yeah, they dropped in the night before because they dropped in the night before D-Day. They didn't drop in on D-Day to take out the gun. But the issues that were found, I mean, there was animation issues of people just A-posing, just floating arms, the MP40 reload animation bugs, some models weren't even animated at all, the assets and the map they used were just not even what was shown in game or even in game, like someone had custom created assets and even the animations for this. It was absolutely balmy. It looked to me like a proof of concept of what the trailer could be. Now, the reaction to this trailer, like I said, was huge. There was videos and articles made about it. The game got review bombed on Steam because of the trailer. Now, really looking back, this was an overreaction from the community because it was a trailer, but really it was the straw that broke the camel's back, because this trailer came after the health update, which introduced bugs, and it came after the British update, which was a bit underwhelming and introduced even more bugs and was really an unfinished update. But this trailer really would be the most significant event for Hell Let Loose of 2023, because it would lead to some big changes. First off, the roadmap that they had just announced was thrown out the window. They were also bringing back PTEs for the PC version, which is testing versions of the game which the public can go in and test. Pretty much what this means is that we can find bugs and issues with their patches and their updates before they're released, so the devs can fix them or change things. They were also increasing their QA resources behind the scenes so they can put more people behind testing what they were actually making. And they also announced an update 14 patch to lower the sprint speed and fix some of the issues. June would end with an average player count of 5,916, with a peak player count of 13,554. July would start with the announcement from the developers that they were shifting focus for the remainder of the year, completely away from the roadmap, more to a slower content delivery pipeline of bringing more 100-player warfare and offensive maps, and with more patches which would be focused on bug fixes. Which is great news, because originally for Hell Let Loose, all the bug fixes would get tied up in an update and you would get maybe 2 or 3 updates per year. But now with getting more patches, that would mean bug fixes would come more frequently. It would also be announced that the controversial sprint speed changes would be removed from the game, as well as the dive to prone functionality. It seems like with the sprint speed changes, they didn't really think about how that would affect the overall game instead of just the infantry, because infantry can now keep up with tanks a lot easier, meaning there are a lot more satchels being placed on tanks. It would affect spawn rates because people could get back to the front lines just that bit quicker. And really, they needed to think about the impact more. The objective game mode, which was meant to be coming in July, would be delayed, and the objective mode has not come into the game since. And neither has the 101st. Patch 14.3 would be announced, and that would include the first part of the tutorial system that Team 17 were introducing to the game, which would be a practice range and like an obstacle course and a small driving area where you could drive around tanks and other vehicles in the game. Now myself and other content creators, we were pushing Team 17 and Black Matter to put in some sort of tutorial system for a very long time, even though that would take away views from people like myself, because I made a hell of a lot of guides and full beginners guides for Hell Let Loose, and we were saying for so long, get this into the game because you really need it. And now Team 17 was starting that process, and while it's basic for what we have at the moment, it's a start. And also in patch 14.3 would be a number of bug fixes, including fixes to the British weapons. And in July we'd also get our first PTE for patch 14.2. July would end with an average player count of 4,529 with a peak of 8,304. August would kick off with the release of patch 14.2, which removed the player movement speed increase and removed the dive to prone. Also with this, the grenade bug would be fixed. A long running bug for Hell Let Loose that had been in the game for well over a year, maybe 2 years. This issue was finally fixed. But unfortunately, with the release of patch 14.2, a hotfix would have to come for that patch because of PC server issues. And then we'd also get a PTE for patch 14.3, which would include people getting their hands on the training environments for the first time and getting a look at the British weapon fixes. The patch would bring some improvements to performance issues that people would get. It would fix an issue that the Panther tank had, but with the British weapons, they still weren't fixed. The British faction was released in May. But it would also be announced that the British forces were getting a rework, one to make them more historically accurate and to actually fully fix them. So it was announced that the British and the Germans would be getting the correct uniforms for the North African theatre. The Bren gun would be getting a usable bipod. A British Thompson would be coming. A new SMLE bolt action rifle, the No. 1 Mark III, which was used throughout World War II, would be coming. A new sniper rifle, an additional Sten gun, the Gammon bomb, and a new tank. They were also looking at improving the recon and artillery gameplay loop, because recon really is primarily used to go camp the enemy's artillery for the entire game to make sure they can't use artillery. And that is the worst gameplay loop in Hell Let Loose, so it's good that they are looking at doing that, but right now that hasn't yet changed. They'll be looking at the node system, which is the resource nodes, because right now you can just build them in your headquarters and leave them for the entire game. I think the nodes right now don't add enough into Hell Let Loose, so they need to do something about it. The progression system was also getting looked at, because right now it does take a hell of a lot of experience to rank up those roles to get those additional loadouts, and personally I don't think it should be like that. They should really reduce the amount of XP you need to get those additional kits, because really those kits, while there are some kits which are 100% better than others in that role, really they're used for different styles of play or different choices. There's not really a lot of kits which are 100% better. You should give players more choice or let them unlock those choices quicker. Tanks would also be getting a look at to see if they can introduce being able to open up hatches on the tanks or not, smoke dispensers, and even a flamethrower tank. The armor system in Hell Let Loose has been criticised of being a bit too simple, especially when comparing it to Postscriptum, which is a more realistic or more hardcore World War II game, where it's considered in that game tank and armor play is so much better. And with that, August would end us with an average player count of 4,219 with a peak of 8,227. September would start with the announcement of head changes for Hell Let Loose. That's every head for every faction would be getting reworked. Now, some people like the changed heads compared to the default ones. Some don't. They are different but slightly similar. I think some of them are better, to be honest. And patch 14.3 would be released, which would bring performance improvements to a lot of the maps in the game. It would increase the level requirement for the commander role from 10 to 30. It would add ultra widescreen support for the PC and fix some of the issues for the British weapons. And just a reminder that the British faction came in May, it's now September, and the weapons still are not fixed. We'd also get the announcement that a number of night maps would be coming to the game: Carentan, San Mary Glees, Utah Beach, Hill 400, Driel, Kharkov, Stalingrad, and Dusk variants for Omaha Beach and El Alamein, along with Dive to Prone coming back to the game, but changed so it can't be abused like it used to. But really, the major announcement for September would come at the end of the month, with them announcing that they had fixed the loadout bug and that it'll be ready to test in the next PTE. A big win, honestly, for Hell Let Loose, considering the loadout bug, like the grenade bug, had been in the game for so long. I mean, I can't even remember how long it's been in there for, but it's good to see that that bug was finally squashed. September would end with an average player count of 4,181, with a peak of 7,923. October would not be a good month for Hell Let Loose. It would start with the announcement that Team 17 was restructuring, which would result in significant job losses, with the majority of them coming within the internal QA department. QA being quality assurance, the team that tests the games, tests the patches and the updates to see what the bugs are, how to reproduce the bugs, and to make sure the stuff that's getting released isn't buggy. Now, for every patch or update for Hell Let Loose, there's always new issues being introduced with them. So with Team 17 announcing that they were getting rid of their QA team, or the majority of it, was a massive negative, because really that would, in theory, lead to buggier patches, because they would have less resources to test it with. And they announced earlier in the year that they were beefing up their QA team so they could test more, but now they were getting rid of most of their QA team. What a mess. But it was also announced that the community manager for Hell Let Loose, Wombat Medic, was also at risk of losing their job, along with the recently hired influencer manager for Hell Let Loose. Now, I know a lot of you are going to maybe laugh at the fact that Hell Let Loose did have an influencer manager, and yes, all of us war correspondents did speak to him, and he had a lot of good plans for bringing the game forward. Yes, there'll be perks for us war correspondents, but also plans to grow the community, introduce better things for the game, which would help grow the game. But they were at risk of losing their job. There was even a petition created on change.org to save Wombat Medic's job as community manager. But also we would get patch 14.4, but that patch would have to be pulled because of server issues that it created, where a bunch of servers just flat out didn't work. Now, I believe the issue for this patch was something that had changed behind the scenes in the files, which meant that, the servers, like the private servers for PC, they wouldn't work. That would be fixed for the patch when it would be re-released, but we'd also have another major event in October. And this event created quite a divide in the community. On one side, you had the competitive scene, which would be full of players that should be at the peak of playing Hell Let Loose. Like really good players, understand the game really well, be really good at playing the game, and understand the need for fair play when it came to competitive games. And on the other side, you had people with common sense. Now, what was this all about? This was about Nvidia Filters, so it's a PC specific issue. Now, if you had an Nvidia card, you'd be able to access Nvidia Filters. By pressing Alt-Z, it will bring up an Nvidia overlay, which you could just adjust some settings for recording or other things in the game. I use this to record all my gameplay, but what this was about was game filters. And game filters allow you to adjust what you see in game by many different variables, and the filters can be used to give players an advantage over other players by adjusting different visibility parameters. And these were used by, I'm not sure how many people, but they were definitely used, and I believe many people in the competitive scene used them a lot, and they were allowed to be used in competitive tournaments. Now, if you look at other games, other competitive games, filters would be blocked off so people can't use them, and there are other third-party tools like Reshade that can do similar things to what game filters can do, and they are completely blocked off at an anti-cheat level. So we had the competitive scene on one side who wanted to use these filters to get an advantage over everyone else. Even though these filters can be used by everyone, they were really used by competitive players. And then you had everyone else with common sense who wanted these filters to be removed because it would generally just put everyone on a level playing field so people couldn't use them. Now on PC, there is no way to 100% put everyone on the level playing field because everyone's got different systems. People will have different frame rates and different frame times. So there's nothing you can do to make it 100% level, but by removing these filters, it helped. And like I said earlier, these filters are blocked in many games, many competitive games, because of the unfair advantage they can give. However, these filters could also be used by colorblind people by putting in a colorblind filter to help them just be able to play the game better because it would counteract what their colorblindness would see. And these filters could be used purely for, let's say, a content creation side, where I used them once in a Band of Brothers style video, and how that looked, while it's kind of bad to play with, that was all done with Nvidia Filters. Now, I was on the side of removing the filters from the game. I thought it would be good for the game, really, just to get rid of them, because for some people they were seen as an issue, for others they weren't, but I thought it'd be best to get everyone on that level sort of playing field. And generally throughout the community, I think everyone was on that same wavelength. Just get rid of them. But there were a vocal amount of competitive players who were saying that they absolutely had to stay in the game and they were needed to play the game. And it really surprised me that the competitive scene were pushing back so hard against the filters being removed, because they are meant to be like the best players, like the peak players in the game. So they wouldn't really need these filters to play the game. And back when I was in the competitive scene, we didn't use the filters. The filters were not allowed. We had to provide screenshots of our gameplay to show we weren't using filters. And there were even competitive players saying that they would shut down their own private servers if they removed the filters, or they would stop playing the game if the filters were removed. And just a couple of days after they announced that they were looking at removing the filters were gone because they're controlled at Nvidia's end, and Nvidia switched them off. Now, I was surprised, and I think many people were surprised that the filters were gone so early. And I think it was a mistake to remove the filters that quickly because, like I said earlier, colorblind people can use the Nvidia filters to help them play the game. Now, in the game, when the filters are removed, there is no in-game colorblind settings. And to this date, there still is no colorblind settings. Team 17 really need to get that accessibility issue fixed. And when the filters are gone, the competitive scene blew up. The Discord server became a massive whining session of competitive players whining about the filters being removed. Even though, like I said, they should be the peak of the community, the best players, it just felt like they really needed these filters to be able to play the game. It was balmy, and a lot of these players who said they would stop playing the game or close down their servers are still fucking playing the game, because I've seen them on the live stream events for competitive games, and those servers are still up. But the competitive scene players, they said they did find a workaround of adjusting monitor settings and Nvidia control panel settings, which is like brightness, contrast, hue and saturation. But even though they had this quote-unquote workaround, they would still whine about the Nvidia filters being removed for about a week or so. To this day, there are people who still whine about the filters being removed from the game. October would end with an average player count of 4,526, with a peak of 9,414. November would see the release of patch 14.5, and it'd be part 1 of the British rework. And with this, we would get the Dusk variant of El Alamein and the Night version of Driel. We would get the new Thompson, the new SMLE rifle, and the Churchill tank. We would also see the new uniform for the British and the Germans. And with this rework, or part 1 of the rework, the British weapons were finally fixed, sort of. Bearing in mind, the British were first released in May, and yeah, it was this patch where the zeroing or the sighting issues for all the weapons were fixed. And I cannot believe it took that long to fix them. But there are still issues with the size of the British weapons when you are aiming down the sights when compared to the other 3 factions in the game. And we'd also get our first look at the skirmish mode, a new mode that's coming to Hell Let Loose, which is a shorter game mode on smaller maps. Now for me, I enjoyed skirmish, I tested it, and it plays really well. It's a 1 capture point location map, and yeah, it plays well. It's quite fast, there's a lot of combat, and of course it's all around 1 point, so there's a lot of stuff going on at once. A lot of people were concerned this would somehow make the game like Call of Duty, because it's a smaller map, but it doesn't at all. I mean, it's still Hell Let Loose, just fighting over 1 point. I don't think the people that say it's going to make it like Call of Duty have ever played Call of Duty or seen Call of Duty, because that game is like, it's a fucking mess, to be honest. But generally, I think the thoughts around the skirmish mode are pretty positive. And November would end with an average player count of 4,655 and a peak of 10,001. And with December, it would be a bit of a quiet month. There'll be a new patch would get the Kharkov and Stalingrad night variants and some bug fixes, but mainly we'll get a look at what the developers' plans are going forward with the game. We'll get a sneak peek at some cosmetics coming and the new US infantry winter uniform, which would replace the pure white uniform they've had for a very long time, a sneak peek of the Crusader Mark III tank, the Gammon bomb, and an announcement of a new map called Mortain, which will come with a warfare and offensive variant, which will come early in 2024, and is based on the US defense of the French town called Mortain. We'd also be told that a new roadmap would be announced in early 2024. Now on the 27th of December, the average player count was 5,397 with a peak of 15,302, but during that month was a sale and, I believe, a free weekend. So for a quick summary of 2023, we had 2 updates, although one of them was update 13.5, which really was a patch, and then 6 separate patches. Comparing that to 2022, where we had 2 updates and 1 patch. Now those numbers don't include any hotfixes. So in terms of updates for Hell Let Loose, it was a good year in terms of the amount of updates we got, but there was a lot of controversy around those updates. You know, we had the British faction, which took months to fix. Well, they're not even fixed yet because they're getting reworked, and part 2 of the British rework is coming in 2024. And there's a lot of other negative moments surrounding Hell Let Loose for the year. There were the layoffs, there was the goddamn awful trailer, and with just the patches and the updates, there always seemed to be another patch that had to fix issues that was introduced in the previous patch, or a hotfix to fix something that the patch introduced. And comparing the player numbers from 2022 to 2023, 2023 is less on average and on peak. Even though we got more updates to the game, I think it's because of the quality of those updates and the other issues that have surrounded the game during the year. I think generally for 2023 for Hell Let Loose, it has been a bit of a bad year. The British faction, yeah, is really underwhelming. Came with bugs, issues, and issues that are still not fixed. But at the start of the year, it looked good at the start when we got the roadmap. So let's go through the roadmap now to see what was actually delivered and what wasn't. And we already know that the roadmap was abandoned shortly after that trailer was released. So in April, yes, we got bug fixes, free DLC, quality life improvements, game analytics, and the premium DLC. That was pretty much all wrapped up with the health update that we received. Now in June we was expecting the British faction to come, but they came actually at the end of May. And we did get bug fixes, free DLC, quality life improvements, analytics, premium DLC, update reported tools, non-verbal communication tools, the improved player locomotion with the British forces. What we didn't get was the map refresh, the new website, and a merch store. Now, I think we did get a new website some point down the year, but it's really like a bare bones website. It's nothing to shout about, so I wouldn't say that this has really come. And a merch store, there is no merch store, so that's not come. And moving into July, yes, bug fixes, more analytics, the tutorial system started, the objective mode was delayed and has not yet been implemented. The 101st Airborne DLC, that's not come. The in-game store has, and premium DLC has come. Now, one thing that's really quite boggling about the objective mode and the 101st Airborne DLC is that it must have been pretty much finished, because they had the trailer for it, so it must have been ready to pretty much drop into the game. But because of the feedback around that trailer, they've maybe scrapped it entirely, or yeah, they've just really delayed it. 104th Airborne DLC, I kind of expect that to come in as a sub-faction for a certain number of maps in Hell Let Loose, because sub-factions have now come into the game. And what sub-factions are is generally you'll have your loadouts restricted to what that particular force in that battle was actually using. And sub-factions were introduced with part 1 of the British rework because, yeah, the British faction, they've had their weapons changed for their maps in the game, and so have the Germans for the 2 maps that they fight the British in. Generally, it's a good step forward for the game, but yeah, I'm really wondering what's happened with the 101st. Now going into September, there's been no Windows 10 version of Hell Let Loose, been no map refresh, there's no Steam Deck verified version. I'm not sure if there ever will be a Steam Deck version of Hell Let Loose, because what I believe is the anti-cheat system that Hell Let Loose uses, Easy Anti-Cheat, I don't think that's compatible with the Steam Deck. But of course, we did get premium DLC. And moving on to September, I don't believe we've got the next part of the tutorial system. The skirmish game mode is not yet in the game, but I think it is coming soon. The Battle of Danzig is not here. We've not seen it since the roadmap announcement. The Winter War is not here. We've not seen it since the roadmap announcement. The Finnish and Polish forces, yeah, they're not here. The new clan system hasn't been talked about at all since the roadmap announcement. Neither has the updated game audio and soundtrack. But of course, I believe anyway, we got premium DLC. And really, you can see when we stopped getting a lot of the stuff on the roadmap, it literally happened when that trailer dropped. That's how big that trailer was. Even though it was just a trailer, it was, like I said earlier, the straw that broke the camel's back, and it made Team 17 and Cover 6 really rethink everything they were doing about Hell Let Loose. And 6 months after that trailer dropped, we still have no roadmap or updated really vision of what they want to do. Yes, the roadmap is going to come hopefully soon. When that new roadmap does, I will make a video on it and give you my own thoughts, but it'll be interesting to see where they go. We know a new map, Mortain, is coming early in the year with skirmish mode, but I'm not sure if that's going to be enough to bring enough players back or bring new players into the game. I think this roadmap needs to have a new theatre announced for it. And yes, of course, we're expecting new maps in the current theatres they have, but I think they really need to swing for the fences to try and grow the player base. Now, you could say the original roadmap was a bit of a swing for the fence because they were bringing in the Polish and the Finnish and bringing in the Winter War, but I think they really need to do something to win players back. And even though they're fixing bugs and generally improving the game and bringing in some new maps and variations of other maps, I don't think that's enough. 2022, while there wasn't really a lot that happened in terms of content updates, it was a good year for player numbers for Hell Let Loose, and 2023 has seen that decline straight down. I think the devs really need to do something, and I think what they need to do is introduce this. It would be a huge undertaking to bring the Pacific into Hell Let Loose, but I think that is the direction that Team 17 need to go to try and bring a lot more people in to Hell Let Loose. We've also got to remember that there are two studios really working on the game, Cover 6 and Expression Games, and I don't know if any actual developers from Team 17 are working on the game as well. And if you look at what 2023 has actually brought into Hell Let Loose, you've got the British faction, which were already created by Black Matter, the creators of Hell Let Loose. So if you look at what Cover 6, Team 17 and Expression Games have actually made for Hell Let Loose, there's some map variations, fixes, and some extra weapons, and really that's about it. We know that there's another new map coming, Mortain, but they've got to be working on something big behind the scenes, right? To have two development studios working on this game, and really this year, in my opinion, produced so little, they've got to be working on something big, right? And if they don't have anything major planned for 2024, then what the hell are these two studios actually doing behind the scenes? Is this like organizational setup they have with Team 17 overseeing Cover 6 and Expression Games? Is it causing too much friction between these three studios? Why don't they just try and really beef up Cover 6 so they can have control over that one studio instead of having to deal with two studios at once? Seems like the more obvious choice to me, right? Have that one studio. But let me know what you think of 2023 for Hell Let Loose down in the comments below, and what you think would Hell Let Loose need to do to bring more people in for 2024. So thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a like, dislike if you didn't like it, subscribe for more, and thank you for watching.